My wife ordered me to kneel for love. I refused, shattered her control, reclaimed my identity, and turned 7 years of marriage into my freedom. I sat in the living room, staring at my wife of 7 years as she glared at me with cold, unrecognizable eyes. Just moments before, we had been having another argument about my working hours, the same fight we had been having for months, but this time, something had shifted. She had crossed a line I never imagined possible in our marriage. The living room suddenly felt smaller, the walls closing in as the weight of her demand crushed the air from my lungs. Her designer suitcase stood packed by the door, a physical threat that this time was not a bluff. The evening light cast harsh shadows across her face, highlighting a cruel satisfaction in watching me squirm. "You can't be serious," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. Every instinct screamed to drop to my knees, to do anything to prevent her from walking out that door. We had built a life together. Our friends, our families, everyone saw us as the perfect couple. What would they think if she left? She crossed her arms, tapping her foot impatiently. "I'm dead serious. I'm tired of not being your priority. If you want this marriage to continue, prove it. Show me how much you need me." Her voice was eerily calm, practiced even, as if she had rehearsed this moment. Something snapped inside me. A lifetime of memories flashed before my eyes, all the times I had canceled plans with friends to accommodate her demands. The promotion I had declined because she didn't want me traveling. The constant walking on eggshells to avoid her disapproval. How had I let things deteriorate to this point? My hands trembled, but not from fear, from a sudden clarity that washed over me like ice water. I straightened my back and looked directly into her eyes. "No," I said, surprising even myself with the firmness in my voice. "I won't do that." Her expression transformed from smugness to shock. "Excuse me?" I said. "No, I won't get on my knees and beg you to stay. That's not how a marriage works. That's not how love works." She hadn't expected resistance. Her face flushed red as she stepped toward me. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me? By refusing the one thing I ask of you?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "What you're asking isn't a sign of love, it's control. And I'm done being controlled." "Fine," she spat, grabbing her suitcase handle. "Don't come crying back to me when you realize what you've lost." She stormed toward the door, pausing for a dramatic moment, clearly expecting me to rush after her to change my mind. Instead, I walked to the door and opened it for her. The look of disbelief on her face would have been comical in any other situation. "You'll regret this," she hissed as she brushed past me. The familiar scent of her perfume lingered, almost making me waver. "Maybe," I replied honestly, "but I'd regret giving up my self-respect more." The door closed behind her with a decisive click. The silence that followed was deafening. I slumped against the wall, sliding down until I hit the floor, my body finally giving in to the tremors I had been suppressing. What had I just done? Had I thrown away 7 years of marriage over a moment of pride? But as the minutes passed, something unexpected happened. Beneath the anxiety and fear, I felt something else growing, a sense of lightness, of rightness in my decision. For the first time in years, I had stood up for myself. I had refused to be diminished. I pulled myself up and walked to the window, watching as her car disappeared down the street. The future yawned before me, uncertain and terrifying, yet somehow full of possibility. This wasn't the end I had ever imagined for us, but as I stood alone in the quiet house, I realized it might be the beginning I desperately needed. The morning after she left, I woke up reaching for someone who wasn't there. Reality crashed down as my hand met cold, empty sheets. For a moment, panic seized my chest. What had I done? 7 years gone in an instant because I couldn't swallow my pride and just give her what she wanted. I checked my phone, no missed calls, no messages. Part of me had expected her to cool off overnight and reach out. The silence was more definitive than any words could have been. When I finally dragged myself out of bed, the house felt different. Quieter, yes, but also somehow less oppressive. I wandered into the kitchen and made coffee just how I liked it. Strong and black, not the watered-down version she always insisted was better for my anxiety. A small decision, but entirely mine. By noon, her mother called. The conversation was exactly what I anticipated. I was selfish, ungrateful, and had never deserved her daughter. I listened silently, then simply said, "She asked me to kneel and beg her to stay. Would you have done that?" The stunned silence before she hung up told me everything. Friends started texting by evening, clearly having heard her version of events. "Trouble in paradise? Everything okay?" I didn't know how to respond. How do you explain that your marriage was actually a carefully constructed prison you hadn't even recognized until someone demanded you crawl? I ordered takeout from a restaurant she had always dismissed as too greasy, another small rebellion, and ate it directly from the container while sitting on the couch. No coaster, no napkin carefully spread across my lap. The pettiness of these minor freedoms almost made me laugh. Sleep eluded me that second night. I found myself standing in her closet at 2 o'clock in the morning, running my fingers over her clothes, breathing in what remained of her presence. Her half-empty dresser drawers revealed she had left in haste, taking only essentials. She expected to come back, or more accurately, she expected me to beg her to return. The third day brought clarity. As I showered and really looked at myself in the mirror, the man staring back looked tired, older than his years. When had I developed that permanent furrow between my brows? When had my shoulders started carrying the weight of constantly anticipating criticism? I called in sick to work and spent the day cleaning. Not just tidying, but purging. I rearranged the living room furniture, positioning my chair by the window where I had always wanted it. I changed the artwork on the walls, bringing out pieces she deemed too masculine or unsophisticated. With each change, the space became more mine. By the end of the week, her sister reached out, the designated diplomat. She's staying with Mom and Dad, she informed me, voice carefully neutral. She thought you might have called by now. Did she tell you what happened? I asked. A pause. She said you refused to fight for your marriage. I laughed, actually laughed out loud. That's one interpretation. The conversation ended awkwardly, but it sparked something important. What was I fighting for all these years? A relationship where my worth was measured by my willingness to subjugate myself, where love was conditional on compliance. That weekend, I found a box of old photographs in the spare room closet, pictures from before we met, camping trips with college friends, a half-marathon finish line, a younger me grinning widely at a concert. When had I stopped doing the things I loved? When had my world narrowed to just pleasing her? I texted my old friend Mark, who I hadn't seen in almost 2 years, because she found him too immature. We met for beers that night. The conversation was awkward at first, but by the third round, it felt like no time had passed. He didn't ask about her until the end, and when I gave him the condensed version, he just nodded. "Man, we've missed you," was all he said. Driving home slightly buzzed and feeling more myself than I had in years, I realized something fundamental was happening. This wasn't just the end of a marriage, it was the reclaiming of an identity. When I pulled into the driveway, I spotted a familiar car parked across the street. My heart lurched painfully, but I didn't approach it. Instead, I walked straight into my house, not our house, my house, and locked the door behind me. The phone rang 10 minutes later. Her name flashed on the screen. I stared at it, watching until it stopped. Almost immediately, a text message appeared, "We need to talk." I set the phone down without responding and slept better that night than I had in years. 2 weeks after she left, I finally returned her call. The conversation was brief and cold. She suggested meeting for coffee to discuss our situation. I agreed, but insisted on a public place. Something in her voice, a calculated softness, put me on guard. We met at a cafe downtown, neutral territory. She arrived looking immaculate as always, but there was something different in her eyes when she spotted me. Surprise, maybe even a flicker of appreciation. I had started hitting the gym again, cut my hair the way I preferred, and was wearing clothes that actually fit me properly instead of the bland, oversized shirts she had always subtly pushed me toward. "You look different," she said as she sat down across from me. "I feel different," I replied simply. She launched into what felt like a rehearsed speech about communication and compromise, about how marriages require work and sacrifice. I listened, nodding occasionally, but a strange detachment had settled over me. Her words, once capable of sending me into spirals of self-doubt, now seemed transparent, manipulative. "I've been doing some thinking," she finally said, reaching for my hand across the table. "I may have overreacted that night. We both said things we didn't mean." I gently withdrew my hand. "I meant what I said. And you did too." Her expression hardened momentarily before she recalibrated. "Maybe we need couples counseling. We can work through this." "What exactly would we be working toward?" I asked, going back to how things were, because I don't want that anymore. That conversation marked a turning point. I walked away with clarity I hadn't expected. She wanted reconciliation not because she missed me or loved me, but because my independence threatened her sense of control. The following month became a period of intense transformation. I reconnected with my passion for photography, something she had dismissed as a hobby not worth pursuing. I joined a local hiking group. I accepted the promotion at work that required occasional travel. My sister, who had always maintained a cautious distance from my wife, visited for a weekend. "I've got my brother back," she said, hugging me tightly before she left. Those words meant more than she could know. As spring turned to summer, the divorce papers remained unsigned on my kitchen counter. Not because I was hesitating, but because moving forward felt less urgent than my personal renaissance. Every day brought new discoveries about myself, preferences and opinions I had buried to keep peace in my marriage. I redecorated the bedroom, painted the kitchen the deep blue I had always wanted, bought a motorcycle, all decisions that would have sparked weeks of tension before. The freedom was intoxicating. Social media became an unexpected battlefield. I rarely posted, but friends tagged me in photos from hikes, concerts, a weekend trip to the coast. I looked relaxed in these pictures, genuinely happy. I knew she was watching. Her own posts became increasingly performative, fancy dinners, nights out, always meticulously captioned about how blessed she was. The first time she showed up unannounced at my door, our door, as she pointedly corrected me, was a rainy Tuesday evening. She had clearly been drinking. Her composure was cracking around the edges. "You changed the furniture," she accused, pushing past me into the house, "and the paint. You know I hate dark colors." "That's why I chose them," I replied honestly. She circled the living room like a prowling cat, touching things, rearranging items on shelves, reclaiming territory. "Are you seeing someone?" she demanded suddenly. The question caught me off guard. I wasn't, but the jealousy in her voice was revealing. Would it matter if I was? Her face crumpled for a moment, the first genuine emotion I had seen from her in years. "You can't just throw everything away. 7 years. Do they mean nothing to you?" "They meant everything to me," I said quietly. "That's why I finally had to choose myself." When I gently but firmly asked her to leave, she stood at the doorway, rain dampening her perfect hair. "You'll get tired of this rebellion," she said, more to herself than to me. "You'll realize what you've lost." As I watched her drive away, I realized something important. Her words no longer had power over me. The man who would have done anything to prevent her from walking out that door no longer existed. That night, I finally signed the divorce papers and dropped them in the mail. Not with anger or regret, but with the peaceful certainty that I was finally on the right path, the path back to myself. The divorce became final on a bright Tuesday morning in early fall. I received the confirmation email while at my desk, surrounded by colleagues who had no idea the significance of that moment. I excused myself, stepped outside, and took a deep breath of crisp autumn air. 7 years of marriage dissolved into a digital notification and a stack of legal documents that would arrive in the mail later that week. I expected to feel something monumental, grief perhaps, or at least a sense of finality. Instead, there was only quiet relief. The legal end of our relationship merely formalized what had already happened emotionally months ago. That evening, as I celebrated with a good scotch and takeout from my favorite restaurant, my phone lit up with a message from her. "Is it done?" Just those 3 words. No emotion, no commentary. "Yes," I replied simply. "It's done." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared several times. Finally, I never thought we'd actually get here. I didn't respond. What was there to say? That I never imagined standing up for myself would lead to the end of our marriage? That somewhere deep down I had hoped she would recognize how unhealthy our dynamic had been and genuinely want to change? The silence seemed the most honest response. 2 days later, flowers arrived at my office, an extravagant arrangement with a simple card. "Congratulations on your promotion. You always were destined for great things." She had signed it with just her initial. My colleagues were impressed. "Secret admirer?" my team lead teased. "Something like that," I replied, uncomfortable with the attention. The gesture was calculated. She knew exactly what she was doing. The promotion had been announced on the company website. My updated title was now visible to anyone who looked me up. She was letting me know she was still watching. The flowers were just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, casual texts started arriving, innocuous at first. A funny meme, a question about where I had stored some kitchenware she couldn't find, a comment about a mutual friend's engagement. Each message constructed to seem harmless, each one designed to re-establish connection. I kept my responses brief, factual, devoid of emotion. This clearly wasn't the reaction she wanted. The texts became more direct. "I miss our Sunday morning coffee ritual. Remember that little Italian place in Providence? I went back there last weekend. It wasn't the same without you. When I didn't take the bait, she escalated. A late-night phone call, her voice slightly slurred. Do you ever think about us? About what we could have been if you hadn't been so stubborn? Stubborn? I repeated, unable to hide my disbelief. Is that what you call refusing to kneel? I was testing you, she said, her tone shifting to something softer, vulnerable. I never actually expected you to do it. I just wanted to see how far you'd go for us. The manipulation was so transparent it almost made me laugh. Good night, I said firmly and ended the call. The following weekend, she appeared at my favorite coffee shop, the one across town that I had started frequenting, specifically because it was far from our old haunts. She was sitting at a corner table when I walked in, pretending to be surprised when she spotted me. What are the chances? She exclaimed, eyes wide with manufactured coincidence. She looked good. She always did, but there was a brittle quality to her smile that hadn't been there before. Rather than create a scene by leaving, I nodded politely and joined the line to order. She was beside me moments later. I've been meaning to call you, she said, as if we were old friends running into each other. I'm hosting a dinner party next weekend, small gathering, just close friends. You should come. I don't think that would be appropriate, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. Her smile faltered. We were together for 7 years. Surely we can be civilized, can't we? The barista called my name, saving me from responding. As I reached for my coffee, she touched my arm, a deliberate, lingering contact. You've changed, she said, studying my face. You look happier. I am, I answered honestly. Something flashed in her eyes. Frustration, perhaps, or determination. We should talk properly sometime, clear the air, maybe over dinner. As I formulated a gentle but firm rejection, my phone rang. It was Mark calling about our plans to go mountain biking that afternoon. I answered, grateful for the interruption, and made my excuses to her. As I walked toward the door, she called after me. I'll text you about dinner. Think about it, okay? Outside, safely out of her sight, I blocked her number. 3 days later, an email arrived at my work address. You're avoiding me. That's fine. I understand you need space. But we have unfinished business, and you know it. This isn't over between us. I stared at those words for a long time, recognizing the threat veiled as persistence. 6 months ago, those words would have filled me with anxiety, made me question whether I was overreacting, whether I should give in just to keep the peace. Now, I simply marked the email as spam and closed my laptop. The sound of persistent knocking pulled me from sleep at 2:17 a.m. Disoriented, I stumbled through the darkened house, assuming it was an emergency. No one visits at this hour with good news. I peered through the peephole and froze. She stood on my porch, illuminated by the motion sensor light. Mascara streaked down her cheeks. Her normally perfect appearance was disheveled, hair windblown, blouse partially untucked. My first instinct was concern. My second was suspicion. I know you're in there, she called, her voice cracking. Please, just 5 minutes. I hesitated, hand on the lock. This was exactly the kind of dramatic scene she excelled at orchestrating, showing up vulnerable, playing to my protective instincts. But the rational part of my brain reminded me that engaging would only encourage further boundary violations. It's the middle of the night, I said through the door. Go home. We can talk tomorrow if it's important. Tomorrow is too late, she cried, slamming her palm against the door. I'm losing everything, my job, my apartment. I need you, just let me in. The desperation in her voice seemed genuine, but I had been fooled before. What happened with your job? I asked, still not opening the door. She leaned her forehead against the wood, voice dropping to a whisper. I've been distracted, making mistakes. They put me on probation last month. Today they let me go. A sob escaped her. Everything's falling apart since you left. I didn't leave, I corrected quietly. You did. She slid down to sit on the porch step, shoulders shaking. I found myself opening the door despite my better judgment, not inviting her in, just standing in the doorway, maintaining some physical boundary between us. She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. Can I please come in? It's freezing out here. It wasn't actually cold, but I reluctantly stepped aside. 5 minutes. Once inside, she moved through the space with familiar ease, heading straight for the kitchen. I watched as she filled the electric kettle, a routine so ingrained she didn't even think about it. Making tea had always been her response to crisis. Why are you really here? I asked, leaning against the counter, keeping distance between us. She busied herself with mugs and tea bags, not meeting my eyes. My lease is up next month. They're raising the rent by 30%. I can't afford it without a job. She glanced up, gauging my reaction. I was thinking maybe I could stay here, just temporarily, until I get back on my feet. The audacity was breathtaking. That's not going to happen. Her hands stilled. Why not? This house is still half mine, morally if not legally. You signed away your rights to this property in the divorce, I reminded her. And there's no moral claim here. You made your choice. A choice you forced me into. Her voice rose sharply. You changed. You became cold, distant. Stop. I cut her off firmly. We both know that's not what happened. The kettle clicked off. Neither of us moved to pour the water. I made a mistake, she whispered, strategy shifting visibly. One stupid, prideful mistake. Don't you believe people deserve second chances? This isn't about forgiveness, I said carefully. It's about recognizing patterns. You didn't just ask me to kneel that night. You've been demanding versions of that same submission our entire relationship. Her expression hardened, then crumpled with surprising suddenness. She was crying again, real tears, messy and uncontrolled. She sank to the kitchen floor, arms wrapped around herself. I have nowhere to go, she sobbed. My parents think I'm still with you. I lied to everyone. I can't face them. Despite everything, compassion stirred in me. I'd never seen her this broken, this genuine. But compassion didn't mean I had to sacrifice my boundaries. I'll help you find a place, I offered, and I can loan you money for a deposit, but you can't stay here. She looked up, hope flickering across her features. You do that for me, after everything? Not for you, I clarified. For who we were to each other once. She rose slowly, composing herself. For a moment, I glimpsed the vulnerable person beneath the manipulation, the frightened woman who had learned that control was the only way to feel safe in the world. I still love you, she said quietly. I know you don't believe that, but it's true. I didn't respond. What could I say that wouldn't either cruelly dismiss her feelings or dishonestly encourage them? She moved toward me then, eyes fixed on mine. Tell me you feel nothing. Look me in the eye and tell me there's not still something between us. The air between us felt charged with history. Every intimate moment, every fight, every reconciliation. For a dangerous second, I felt the magnetic pull of familiarity. She must have sensed my momentary weakness. She reached up, brushing her fingers against my cheek. We could start over, do things differently this time. I caught her wrist gently, removing her hand. No. Just that one word, but it carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken others. No to revisiting the past. No to endless cycles of control and submission. No to sacrificing myself again. The clarity in my voice must have finally reached her. Something shifted in her expression. Resignation, perhaps, or simply exhaustion. Your 5 minutes are up, I said softly. She nodded, gathering her purse with trembling hands. At the door, she turned back. I meant what I said about still loving you. I believe you, I replied. But love shouldn't hurt like ours did. After she left, I stood in the silent house, expecting to feel the familiar weight of guilt. Instead, there was only certainty that I had made the right choice, not just tonight, but every day since I refused to kneel. A month after her late-night visit, I received a formal email requesting to meet and discuss final matters. No emotional appeals, no manipulative language, just a straightforward request for closure. Something about its tone felt different, more grounded. I agreed to meet at a quiet cafe near my office. She arrived precisely on time, dressed simply, a stark contrast to her usual calculated appearance. As she sat across from me, I noticed subtle changes, the absence of her signature red lipstick, hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, minimal jewelry. She looked more authentic than I had seen her in years. Thank you for meeting me, she began, hands wrapped around her coffee mug. I've been in therapy twice weekly since my breakdown at your house. I nodded, unsure where this was heading. My therapist suggested I make amends, she continued, not to win you back or change your mind, but because it's part of my healing, and maybe yours too. She placed a small envelope on the table between us. This is a letter. You can read it now, later, or never. It's your choice. I didn't reach for it. What's in it? Everything I should have said years ago. Acknowledgements of how I treated you. Apologies that don't come with conditions. She met my gaze directly. And a promise to respect your boundaries going forward. Something in her demeanor felt genuinely different. There was a groundedness that had always been missing, a lack of the subtle tension that typically signaled she was performing rather than being. I found an apartment, she continued when I didn't speak. Small, nothing fancy, but it's mine. And I start a new job next week. Different industry, entry-level position. That's good, I said, meaning it. I'm glad things are looking up. She smiled faintly. They're not, really. Everything's harder, smaller, less comfortable. But it's real, which is something I haven't experienced in a long time. We sat in surprisingly comfortable silence for a moment. I've been thinking about that night, she said finally. When I asked you to kneel. Do you know why I did that? The question caught me off guard. I had spent months analyzing that moment from every angle but had never landed on a satisfying explanation. Control? Power? Testing how far you could push me? She nodded slowly. All of those, yes. But mostly fear. You were changing. Subtle things at first. Standing your ground on small decisions, reconnecting with friends I didn't approve of. I could feel you slipping away, becoming someone I couldn't manipulate. So I escalated. If you knelt, I'd have proof I still owned you. If you refused, I'd have justification to leave before you could leave me. The raw honesty stunned me. For the first time, I glimpsed the frightened person behind the calculated facade. Someone so terrified of abandonment she would rather orchestrate it than risk being blindsided. I never planned to leave, I said quietly. I know that now. But I couldn't believe it then. She touched the envelope lightly. There's something else in here, the name of my therapist. She specializes in people recovering from relationships like ours, from both sides, those who control and those who were controlled. If you ever want to talk to someone, she could recommend a colleague. My first instinct was defensive. I wasn't the one who needed therapy, but the past year had taught me that healing isn't just for those who cause harm, but also for those who endure it. I'll consider it, I said. She nodded, then glanced at her watch. I should go, I've said what I needed to say. She stood, collecting her purse. Just one more thing. Thank you for not kneeling that night. You saved both of us by refusing. After she left, I sat alone with the unopened envelope, turning it over in my hands. Whatever it contained, sincere, remorse, or another subtle manipulation, I realized it no longer held power over me. My happiness, my peace, my future, none of it depended on her words anymore. When I finally opened it that evening, sitting on my back porch with a glass of whiskey, her letter was everything she had promised, a thorough, unflinching accounting of her behavior, genuine apologies with no expectations attached, and the therapist's contact information. The final paragraph stayed with me long after I had put the letter away. I asked you once to kneel to prove you loved me. I understand now that the truest proof of love, both for yourself and for another, is sometimes the courage to stand firmly on your own 2 feet. 2 weeks later, I called the therapist's office and scheduled my first appointment. Not to salvage what was lost or to nurse old wounds, but to understand how I had surrendered myself so completely and to ensure I never made that mistake again. On the 1-year anniversary of the night she left, the night I found my voice, I climbed Mount Lafayette, something I had always wanted to do but had put off because she found hiking pointless. Standing at the summit, wind whipping around me and an endless horizon stretching in every direction, I felt profound gratitude for that terrible moment when she demanded I kneel. In refusing to lower myself, I had finally risen to my full height. That evening, I received a simple text from her. I hope you're well, nothing more, no hidden agenda. I am, I replied. I hope you are too. Getting there, she wrote back. And somehow, after everything, I found I genuinely wished her well on that journey. Not because I still loved her or harbored hope for reconciliation, but because I had finally learned the most important lesson of all. True strength isn't measured by power over others, but by the ability to stand firmly in your own worth, wishing peace even to those who once tried to diminish you. Our story has come to an end. If you've made it this far, thank you for reading. I hope it resonated with someone who needed to hear it. Feel free to share your thoughts below. Sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same. Take care of yourselves.